Before I start, quick note, if you enjoy emotional, real-life family stories like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps, and I appreciate you being here. I never thought I'd be the kind of person writing a post like this, but here I am. I'm Emily, 29, living in the Midwest, and until recently I honestly believed my family was complicated, but loving. Especially my relationship with my older brother, Ryan. Growing up, everyone called him the golden child. He was louder, more confident, always the center of attention. I was the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one expected to understand and step aside. Ryan and I were never close, but we were civil. He had a way of making everything about himself. Birthdays, holidays, even my college graduation somehow turned into a story about how he helped me stay motivated. My parents brushed it off as that's just Ryan. I learned early that pushing back only made things worse. When I got engaged to my fiancé, Mark, I thought maybe this would be different. This was my moment. Mark is kind, steady, the complete opposite of the chaos I grew up with. Planning our wedding felt like building something safe and joyful for the first time in my life. Ryan's reaction was off. He smiled, hugged me, congratulated us, but there was something behind his eyes. He kept making comments like, "Wow, didn't think you'd settle down before me," or "Guess I'm not the most important sibling anymore." He laughed when he said it, but it never felt like a joke. He also kept inserting himself into the wedding planning. Offering opinions no one asked for. Questioning our budget. Asking who was paying for what. At one point he even joked, "Don't forget who your family is when you walk down that aisle." I should have paid attention to that feeling in my stomach. At the time, I told myself I was being dramatic. That families are messy. That weddings make people weird. I had no idea those little comments were warning signs, or that my brother was already planning to turn the happiest day of my life into something I'd never forget, for all the wrong reasons. The wedding wasn't just a party to me. It was symbolic. Mark and I had been together for 5 years, through job losses, family drama, and one tiny apartment where we learned how to communicate instead of explode. He proposed on a quiet weekend trip, no crowd, no spectacle, just us. That's how our relationship always was. Calm. Intentional. Safe. Growing up in my family, safety wasn't guaranteed. Love came with conditions, and approval was something you earned by not rocking the boat. Ryan understood that early and played it perfectly. He was charming when it benefited him and cruel when no one was watching. If there was praise to be handed out, he made sure it landed on him. If there was blame, it somehow found its way to me. My parents leaned on him heavily. Ryan gave opinions on everything. Finances, family decisions, even other people's relationships. He loved being the responsible one, even when he wasn't. And they let him. Questioning Ryan meant questioning the family hierarchy. When it came to the wedding, my parents insisted Ryan be involved. Not just as a guest, but as a groomsman, a speaker, someone with a role. I hesitated. Mark noticed it immediately. He gently asked, "Are you sure about this?" I said yes, even though my chest tightened when I did. I wanted one day where I didn't have to manage Ryan's emotions. One day where I didn't have to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I wanted to walk down the aisle focused on the man I loved, not on my brother's mood, but in my family. Excluding Ryan would have caused a war. So I agreed. I told myself he'd behave. That this was my wedding, not his stage. Looking back now, that decision feels painfully naive. Because to Ryan, my wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a threat. The closer the wedding got, the harder it became to ignore Ryan's behavior. What started as jokes slowly turned into something sharper, more deliberate. At the engagement party, after a few drinks, he raised his glass and said, "Well, Emily finally found someone willing to put up with her." People laughed. I forced a smile. Mark didn't. After that, the comments kept coming. He'd ask Mark questions that felt less like curiosity and more like interrogation. "So how much do you make again? You sure you're ready to support a wife? Once, when Mark stepped away, Ryan leaned in and said, "Just so you know, she can be a lot. Don't say I didn't warn you." I laughed it off, but inside I felt sick. He also ignored boundaries constantly. He asked to see our wedding budget, our guest list, even suggested cutting some of my friends because family should come first. When I told him no, he acted. The morning of the wedding was surreal in the best way. I woke up early in the hotel room, sunlight spilling through the curtains, my phone buzzing with messages from friends telling me how excited they were. For the first time in weeks, the anxiety loosened its grip on my chest. Today was about love. About Mark. About starting something new. When I put on my dress, I cried, not from stress, but from relief. It felt like stepping into a version of myself who had finally chosen happiness without apologizing for it. My bridesmaids laughed, music played softly in the background, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly aligned. Ryan showed up late, of course. He walked into the bridal suite unannounced, wearing his suit jacket half-buttoned, flashing a grin like he owned the place. "Relax," he said when I looked surprised. "Just wanted to see the bride." He scanned me from head to toe. "Wow. Guess you clean up nice." Something in his tone made my stomach twist, but I brushed it aside. It was too late to spiral now. Guests were arriving. The ceremony space looked exactly how I'd imagined it, white chairs, soft florals, everything calm and intentional. When the music started and I took my father's arm, my heart pounded, but it was the good kind of nervous. Mark stood at the altar, eyes already glassy, smiling like I was the only person in the world. I remember thinking, nothing can ruin this. Ryan sat in the front row, smiling too. But it wasn't pride or happiness on his face. It was anticipation. At the time, I didn't recognize it for what it was. I thought it was nerves. I thought it was excitement. I had no idea that while I was walking toward my future, my brother was waiting for the perfect moment to tear it apart, in front of everyone I loved. The ceremony itself went off without a hitch. We said our vows. Mark's hands were shaking when he slipped the ring on my finger. I remember thinking that even if nothing else went right in life, this moment would always be ours. The reception started beautifully too. Dinner, laughter, clinking glasses. I finally let myself relax. Then came the speeches. Ryan stood up unannounced. He wasn't on the schedule. The DJ hesitated, looking at me for confirmation. Ryan waved him off confidently. "I'm her brother," he said into the mic. "I think I deserve a few words." Before I could react, the room went quiet. At first, he played it safe. Childhood stories. Fake sentiment. Then his tone shifted. "Emily's always been complicated," he said, chuckling. "A lot of you probably don't know this, but before Mark, she had a bit of a wild phase." My heart dropped. He talked about my past relationships. Exaggerated them. Twisted them. Then he looked straight at Mark and said, "Hope you know what you're marrying into." People stopped laughing. Then Ryan delivered the final blow. He claimed I had doubts about the wedding. That I'd confided in him about second thoughts. That I was only getting married because it was time. None of it was true. I stood up, shaking, telling him to stop. He raised his hands like I was overreacting. "Relax. I'm just being honest." Mark looked devastated. Guests whispered. Phones came out. Ryan ended his speech with, "I just think everyone deserves the truth." The truth was this: my brother had just destroyed my wedding for attention. And he did it with a smile. The room felt like it tilted on its axis. For a few seconds, no one moved. No music. No clinking glasses. Just a thick, unbearable silence broken by whispers that grew louder by the second. Someone near the back awkwardly laughed, thinking maybe this was some kind of tasteless joke. It wasn't. You could see it on Mark's face, the confusion, the hurt, the way he searched my eyes for answers to questions I didn't even know how to process myself. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. My mother rushed toward Ryan, whispering angrily, but not loud enough for anyone else to hear. My father stood frozen, staring at the floor. No one grabbed the microphone away from him. No one told him to sit down. Ryan shrugged and walked back to his seat like he'd just delivered a heartfelt toast. I broke. I ran to the bathroom in my wedding dress, locking myself into a stall as my entire body shook. I couldn't stop crying. My makeup smeared. My hands felt numb. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead I was hiding from my own guests, humiliated and exposed. Outside, I could hear the muffled chaos, people asking what was going on, others speculating, some leaving early. When Mark finally found me, his voice was gentle, but his eyes were red. He said he believed me. That he knew my brother was wrong. But the damage was done. The reception never recovered, the energy was gone. Conversations were tense. People avoided eye contact with me. Ryan stayed the whole night, laughing, drinking, acting like nothing had happened. And that hurt more than anything. Because he wasn't embarrassed. He was proud. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from relatives, distant cousins, even people I barely knew. Some asked if I was okay. Others asked what Ryan had meant. A few asked if it was true. Before I could even process my own feelings, Ryan beat me to it. He posted on social media, calling his speech a misunderstood joke. He wrote that people were too sensitive and that he was just trying to lighten the mood. According to him, I'd taken things out of context. I was stressed. Emotional. A bride who couldn't take humor. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He laughed. "Wow, you're really milking this," he said. "I didn't ruin anything. If your marriage is that fragile, maybe that's not my fault." He told our parents that I'd approved the speech. That I'd shared those doubts with him privately. That I was now backtracking to save face. None of it was true. My mother called me later, her voice tired. She said, "Ryan didn't mean it like that. You know how he is." She suggested I post something online to clear his name. To smooth things over. That's when it hit me. Ryan wasn't embarrassed because he didn't see what he did as wrong. He truly believed he was entitled to that moment. Entitled to my story. Entitled to control the narrative. And worse, he expected me to clean up the mess, just like always. Within days, the pressure started. It came quietly at first, gentle texts, careful phone calls, the kind meant to sound supportive while slowly steering me back into line. My aunt told me I should be the bigger person. My uncle said Ryan was just trying to be funny and that weddings were emotional for everyone. One cousin suggested I was overreacting because no one really believed him anyway. But the worst came from my parents. They invited us over for dinner, framing it as a chance to heal. Ryan was already there when Mark and I arrived. No warning. No choice, he didn't even stand up when we walked in. My mother said we needed to move on. That holding on to anger would ruin the memory of the wedding. As if it wasn't already ruined. My father looked at me and said, "He's your brother. You only get one." No one asked how I was sleeping. No one asked how Mark felt. No one acknowledged the humiliation, the betrayal, the damage done in front of everyone we loved. Ryan sat back, arms crossed, smirking. When I tried to explain how hurt I was, he interrupted. "See? This is what I mean. She's always dramatic." And just like that, the narrative shifted. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the problem. I realized then that this wasn't about one speech. This was about years of conditioning. Years of protecting Ryan at my expense. Years of expecting me to absorb the pain so the family could stay comfortable. That night, I left early. And for the first time I didn't apologize. Once the noise died down and the opinions stopped flooding in, the silence hit me harder than anything else. At night, I lay awake replaying the wedding in my head, the look on Mark's face, the whispers, Ryan's smug smile. I felt exposed, like something sacred had been ripped open and left for everyone to judge. I cried in ways I hadn't since childhood. Quietly. Ugly. The kind of crying that leaves your chest aching and your eyes swollen for days. I wasn't just grieving the wedding I lost, I was grieving the family I thought I had. Every memory started to feel tainted. Every joke, every time I'd been told to let something go, suddenly made horrible sense. Anger followed the grief. Hot, consuming anger. Not just at Ryan, but at myself for trusting him. For ignoring the signs. For letting my family convince me that my feelings were always secondary. The worst part was the loss of trust. I didn't feel safe around my own relatives anymore. Conversations felt performative. Love felt conditional. I realized that if they could excuse this public humiliation on the most important day of my life, they would excuse anything. Mark held me through it all. He reminded me that I wasn't crazy. That what happened was real. That my pain was valid. Without him, I might have believed the version of events they were trying to force on me. Something shifted inside me during those weeks. The sadness didn't disappear, but underneath it, something stronger began to form. Resolve. And once it took hold, I knew I couldn't go back to being silent ever again. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, stitching together moments from my past that I'd always brushed off. Late one night, unable to sleep, I started replaying old memories, birthdays where Ryan blew out my candles as a joke, family dinners where my accomplishments were interrupted or minimized, times he'd embarrassed me in front of friends and then accused me of being too sensitive. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. Ryan didn't ruin my wedding because he was drunk or careless. He did it because the attention wasn't on him, because I was stepping into a life that didn't revolve around managing his ego. My happiness threatened his role as the center of the family, and he couldn't stand it. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The way he'd positioned himself as the truth-teller while tearing me down. The way my parents rushed to defend him, even when the evidence was right in front of them. The way I'd been trained to doubt my own feelings while excusing his cruelty. It wasn't about the speech. It was about control. Ryan needed me small. Embarrassed. Questioning myself. And when my wedding symbolized independence, stability, and joy, he sabotaged it to remind me where he thought I belonged. That realization hurt more than the wedding ever could. Because it meant my brother hadn't just been careless. He'd been intentional, and once I accepted that truth, I knew forgiveness without accountability was no longer an option. For most of my life, I'd been praised for being easygoing. The calm one. The one who didn't escalate, didn't argue, didn't make things uncomfortable. I finally understood what that really meant. I'd been convenient. After the wedding, everyone expected me to return to that role. To smooth things over. To swallow my pain so the family dynamic could reset. I could feel the pressure building, like a familiar weight settling back onto my shoulders. And then, one morning, something inside me snapped. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my wedding photos, the ones taken before the speech. I realized I couldn't look at them without feeling sick. And I knew that if I stayed silent, this moment would become another unspoken rule: Ryan can hurt you, and you will survive quietly. I decided I was done being the bigger person. I stopped responding to messages that minimized what happened. I blocked Ryan on social media. When relatives pushed for reconciliation, I told them plainly, I'm not forgiving someone who hasn't taken responsibility. For the first time, I chose my peace over their comfort. Mark supported me completely. He reminded me that boundaries weren't revenge, they were protection. That I didn't owe anyone access to me simply because we shared blood. I didn't know yet what accountability would look like. I didn't have a master plan or a dramatic confrontation lined up. But I knew this much: I was no longer going to stay silent. And whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. I didn't want explosive revenge. I didn't want screaming matches or public meltdowns that could be twisted against me. Ryan thrived in chaos, he fed on reactions. If I wanted to protect myself and make an impact, I had to be strategic. So I slowed down. I started by documenting everything. Screenshots of his posts. Messages where he minimized what he did. Texts from relatives pressuring me to forgive for the sake of the family. I wrote down exactly what happened at the wedding while it was still fresh, who was there, what was said, how people reacted. Then I quietly started talking to people. Not gossiping. Just telling the truth, calmly, clearly, without emotion. When someone asked what happened, I didn't defend myself. I stated facts. Ryan made claims that weren't true. He did it publicly. He hasn't apologized. Something interesting happened. When I stopped explaining and started stating, people listened. I also made decisions about access. I didn't attend family gatherings where Ryan would be present. I didn't argue about it. I simply declined. When my parents pushed back, I told them this wasn't punishment, it was a boundary. Emotionally, I prepared myself for fallout. I knew some people would side with him no matter what. I accepted that ahead of time. That acceptance was powerful. It meant I wasn't fighting to be believed anymore, I was choosing peace. This wasn't about humiliating Ryan, it was about removing his power over me. And I could feel the balance starting to shift. Ryan didn't notice the shift at first. He was too busy enjoying the attention he'd stirred up, too confident that the family would continue cushioning him from consequences. But when I stopped engaging, stopped defending myself, stopped showing up where he expected me to be, he grew restless. And careless. At a family gathering I skipped, Ryan apparently decided to set the record straight. According to my cousin, he went on a rant about how I'd always been jealous of him, how I was trying to punish him by turning people against him. The bitterness in his voice shocked even those who usually defended him. My aunt told him he should apologize. Ryan snapped back, loudly, that he had nothing to apologize for. That if my marriage couldn't survive a little honesty, then that was my problem. He accused Mark of manipulating me. He mocked my boundaries. He laughed about the wedding speech like it was still some inside joke. That was the moment the room turned. People started pushing back. Asking why he felt entitled to say those things. Why he couldn't just admit he crossed a line. Ryan doubled down, raising his voice, twisting words, painting himself as the victim of a smear campaign. But without me there to absorb the blame, his behavior stood naked and exposed. My parents finally saw it too. Not all at once, but enough. Enough discomfort. Enough unease. Enough moments where Ryan couldn't hide behind humor or charm. The mask slipped because I wasn't holding it in place anymore. And once people see who someone really is, they can't unsee it. The consequences didn't come with a dramatic explosion. They came quietly, which somehow made them more powerful. Invitations stopped including Ryan by default. Family group chats grew awkward. Conversations went silent when he entered the room. People who once laughed at his jokes now looked uncomfortable. The charm that had always protected him stopped working once everyone saw the bitterness underneath. My parents changed too. Slowly, painfully. They stopped defending him outright. They didn't confront him aggressively, but they no longer rushed to smooth things over for him. For the first time, Ryan had to sit with the discomfort he'd created, without someone stepping in to fix it. He reached out to me once. Not with an apology, but with frustration. He said the family was treating him differently and accused me of poisoning people against him. I replied with one sentence, I told the truth. What people do with it is not my responsibility. That was the last message I sent him. Ryan lost something far more valuable than attention, he lost credibility. People stopped trusting his version of events. His words carried less weight. And in a family built on appearances, that loss mattered. Accountability didn't look like a courtroom or a public apology, it looked like consequences he couldn't escape. And for the first time, he was the one sitting alone with them. It's been months since the wedding, and while the pain hasn't vanished completely, it no longer controls me. Mark and I learned something important through all of this. our marriage didn't start the way we planned, but it started with honesty, unity, and the decision to protect each other no matter who stood on the other side. I no longer chase approval from people who only love me when I'm convenient. Losing that illusion was painful, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I feel like an adult who gets to choose her own peace. If you're dealing with a toxic sibling or family betrayal, here's what I wish I'd known sooner: love does not require self-sacrifice at the altar of someone else's ego. Being the bigger person shouldn't mean being the quieter victim. Silence only teaches people how far they can push you. Setting boundaries will cost you relationships, but they're usually the ones built on your compliance. The ones worth keeping will survive honesty. Ryan didn't just ruin my wedding. He revealed exactly who he was. And in the end, that truth gave me something far more valuable than revenge. It gave me clarity, strength, and a future built on respect. If this story sounds familiar, trust yourself. You're not overreacting.